Hey guys, welcome back. Another one of those. We're gonna have at least another 14 of those, so that's gonna have to get used to my annoying voice and non-stop talking with my Brazilian sexy uh, accent. All right, so let me just say like an official hi here. Hi, everyone. All right, and I'm gonna start by sharing my screen again. Let's do this. All right. Let me just move this stuff out of the way. And I'm just like, I'm generating right now a little movie here. It's kind of like processing right now because I want to make sure that you guys have like the entire process, like the time lapse of everything. So everything that I did after I transferred, remember like I rescaled the model and I brought back to ZBrush and then I started sculpting. So anything from that point all the way to what I did today before the class, I was doing a little, kept going with Sketch a little bit. So everything is recorded in there. So I'm just like generating the movie so I can actually upload for you guys. And then that way you're gonna have two movies. The first one from the cube all the way to that spot, and then from that spot all the way to whatever I have right now, just as a record. And then what I'm gonna do today, every new month, I kind of decide to change the order a little bit. Always trying to adapt to make sure that things are as clear as possible. I don't want you guys to get confused about anything. So my intention is to take like this first week very easily, right? Like just take easy by just like having fun with the sketch itself. And then making sure that everything in the scene is prepared to receive like shaders and everything. So that's why I was concerned about the scale, right? Like make sure that the scale is correct, that the rotation, of the object in relation to the XYZ in the world, everything is pointing to the same, to the correct direction and everything. And then from that point on, for example, today I'm gonna be doing mostly sculpting, which is cool that we can actually jam together, right? Like if you guys have your own stuff going on, you can do it, or you can observe how I'm doing on my side here. I'm going to be explaining a little bit more about the forms, how I'm approaching them, maybe talk a little bit more about some of the brushes, but it really doesn't have a lot of mystery, the stuff I have, but I'm gonna explore a little bit of them just so you see how I'm using them, and also talk about like the scale of the eyeball, but without going into detail about the construction of the eyeball just yet. So we're just going to be talking about the scale. I can talk a little bit about the orientation of the eyeballs, the distance between the pupils, for example. That's going to be a good measure to have in there, because with that in mind, we can actually discover what's the distance between the eyeballs themselves, right? And then because we want to make sure that we are bringing something that looks like slightly anatomically correct, because with humans we have all kinds of variations, right? But there is always like a threshold, and then if you can keep things within that threshold, then we're going to be good to go. So I want to make sure in that same spirit, it's like have everything very consistent, so we can have like predictable results with the renders later on. And then tomorrow is going to be basically like we're going to be using ZWrap. In the past, I would do like all the projection manually, and you can see even like in the May class of last year, everything was done by hand. But then if you want to do that, if you don't have access to ZWrap, then you can do that way. Now, if you have access to ZWrap, I'm going to be showing you tomorrow, it's like where you can download from. You can download like a demo version that works for a whole month. So that's going to be perfect for this class. But then if by any chance you actually downloaded and you already used and already expired your first month, I still have a few licenses I got for free from them, actually. Yesterday, I was putting disclaimers about I don't have, any relationship with this and this website. But with them, I actually have a little bit of a relationship. What happens that last year we were talking about it, and I said, I'm going to try to contact them and say, would be okay if you guys could give us some license, just for testing during this class. And they are super nice, It's like they send me one license to myself, like a lifetime, blah blah blah. It's like just for ZWrap, not for the main software that they sell. But the ZWrap plugin for ZBrush, which works great. So I got the lifetime license for that one, which is really cool. And then I got another 30 license to distribute to the students because I thought it would be just for that class. It was like last year, sometime last year. But then it ended up like not everybody wanted the license because they were just using for that specific month, or some other people already had in their companies. And then over time, it's like every month I offer, and then a few people always claim it. So I think I still have probably like 5 or 6 licenses. And then since it was given like last October, something like that, September, October, yes, October, I still have this license valid all the way to October of this year. So I have a couple of months of license. So I'm gonna have to tell you guys, like, it's gonna be like first come, first serve, So if you guys drop me an email, the first 6 emails I get in there, if you need it, right? Try not to hoard. If you have access to the website and you're gonna download it and have that for free, it's like is one thing. The other thing is if you don't have access anymore by any reason, for any reason, then you can claim those. Send me an email, and then either a message through the website or an official email asking for it, and then I can send to you guys. And then so let's take a look at this. Let's open a scene here I have for the scale itself. So I have a scene in here that I saved before, which is, let's see if we can find it here. So let's go to there is an eyeball here. So and then I have let's see, scenes. Let's try this guy here. So I saved in October last year, so it should be with the right measurements and everything. So let's just take a look at this. Still loading there. So I have the scene with this bunch of eyeballs in there. I don't need all of them. I can just either delete or just get rid of those guys. And you see that I have some measurements in here, right? And the way I created those ones, remember yesterday when we did that, measuring the scale of the head, you basically go to create, right? And you're gonna go to, create construction locator measure tools, right? Distance. So this one here, and then you can use the grid, right? Like snap to grid, that first option in there if you want to do that, or you can just do freeform. So the way this thing is set right here, if you look from the top, that's basically what I have in terms of the measurements of the eyeballs for an average human, right? So the way to find it, best way is always ask Google, right? So if I look at here, for example, Google, the size of a human adult eye is approximately 24 millimeters, so 2.4 centimeters. And then it's not like a complete sphere, right? Like you're gonna get like different values here for like the height of it, depth of it, right? But normally when you're doing something like, for example, for rigging, we're not too concerned about it. We normally sculpt like a perfect sphere with just like a little bulge in the cornea, right? It's easier for the riggers to find the perfect center and everything. But then if you're going for something completely physically accurate, then you're probably going to have to account for those differences, in the depth. It's kind of like a little bit more oval than it is a sphere. And then so if you take this as an average, so 24.2 millimeters, you can basically round that up to about like 24, right? You can use a 24, which is going to be very easy for us to calculate, for example, the size of the iris, because let's see, human eye, if you just add like iris size in here, then the iris is basically 10 to 13, and the average is basically like 12 millimeters, 1.2 centimeters, right? So that's very easy relationship, right? In relation to the size of the diameter, it's like the eyeball in there. It's going to be 24, which is what I have here. So if I select, you can see right there. So I have a 24 right there. And then so 24 is from this to this, right? And then obviously I'm using a perfect sphere in here. And then to calculate the size of the iris, that is basically half of that. So that's a 12 in here, right? So that's why I did that way. Then obviously it's the size of the iris, but you have to remember there's a little blend, right? There's a blend that happens like between the iris and the sclera. So you're gonna see that little kind of like fading, little gradient in there at this little edge. And then you have to account for that as well. You're gonna have to find out, for example, like some people look like they have like bigger irises Some people look like they have smaller irises. Some people look like they have more extended caruncula, which is this little piece here. And some people have shorter ones. When I model them, I'm going to be talking about like the details of the models and everything later, right? But when I model them, I model them very extended all the way to the iris, which is incorrect. Like in real life, you're going to probably like end around here. But I like having that because I normally add a very soft gradient. And then I can have veins painted both in this object in here as a texture and that object as a texture. And then with the transparency, based like those veins, they create like 2 layers of veins. And it creates a nice effect, you know, kind of like looks more organic in there. But we're not going to talk about this. It's just scale today. And then once you get really into the eyeball and the construction and all that stuff, then we're going to explore everything about them. But for now, what I'm interested in is the size of the eyeball, 24, the iris 12, and then the distance between them, right? So you're going to see something interesting here. See, like the eyeballs, they are not perfectly square at 90 degrees, right? So right here, I don't know if I have I have those ones frozen, so you don't see it in there. But if I do, for example, something like, if I create, let's see, like a cube, and then I can use this cube at, with subdivisions, let's see, 2, let's do 2 subdivisions. And then let's just make it bigger in here. Oops, something like that. Let's just see a little bit like how much rotation I have. So if you can just like square it against those lines in the middle in there, you're gonna have like a rough idea about it. So for example, if I put it around here, that gives me like a roughly 2.5 degrees of rotation outwards, right? So the way it works is like this. So you probably noticed that like if you did like now that you have more experience, probably you don't do that anymore. But in the past, every time you try to add like an eyeball facing forward at 90 degrees, a perfect angle like this one in the middle, when you put the eyeballs right in the socket right in there, like in your character, the character turned out to look cross-eye, right? You would have like some cross-eye character gonna look funny. But then what happens like in real life, it's like if you do that experiment, you know, it's like you put your finger right in front of your face and you start like you start like getting the finger closer and closer to your nose, right? And looking at the finger, you're definitely going to get crossed eye, right? Like your focus is right in the middle, and as the angle changes, it's going to get right in the middle right here, and then you're going to get crossed eye. And the opposite is true as well. So if you're looking towards like an object that's very far away, the tendency is that your eyeballs, they're going to rotate outwards slightly. So this is a trick we use to make sure that the character looks alive, is to, for example, like pretending that the character is looking ahead, you know, it's like looking to a distant point in the horizon, for example. It's almost like someone thinking about something. So, you know, when you see a character like that with that type of effect in there, that's very subtle. You instantly think that the character has thoughts, right? So that's the whole intention, is to create a creature or a character that look like they have their own thoughts going on. So another example I use is like Magic Eye. It's a collection of books back in the day, like many years ago. Magic Eye was kind of like a generated by computer kind of fractals. You have all those fractals. Each page of the book had a bunch of fractals. And at first you cannot see anything. But then if you do it correctly, you look at the book correctly, you start seeing image like 3-dimensional images popping out of the page. And the way they did that, obviously, is by, you can do it in two different ways. If you want to force to see an image in there, you can actually go completely cross-eye, and then you're going to see a couple of patterns. They're going to be basically like almost like a repetition of each other. So at some point, 4 patterns or so, they're going to basically like interlace and then form a single image. And then you're going to see like a depth. It's almost like a Z depth that's in there. Actually, that's how they did it. They had a Z depth image to create that impression that there's a 3-dimensional effect in there. But the thing is, like, if you go cross-eye to force that, you basically force the opposite effect. So for example, if you have like a pyramid that was supposed to come out of the page, just like a pyramid, right? Looking from the top of the pyramid, if you force like going cross-eye, you're gonna see a hole. So basically like the pyramid's the reverse pyramid, it goes inside. But every time you basically like, if you practice enough, your eyes to go outwards, you start seeing the pyramid the way it has to be seen. And the way that the instructions in the book would teach you is basically like put the book in front of like some very distant object, for example, a mountain. Put the book right in front of your face right here with the mountain right behind it. And then you basically would lower the book very slowly, keep the focus at the mountain, and then very slowly bring the book back to that position without missing that focal point far away. And then when you do that, you instantly start seeing the image the way it's supposed to be. So that means like you're actually using this divergent point of view in there. So with all of that being said, you know, between 2 and 3 angles of rotation, that's basically what I use normally. Sometimes I go a little bit by feel, but it's never more or less than this. It's normally around 2 to 3. So this is right in the middle, so 2.5, which is good. And then now you're going to notice that I have this point here, this locator that's right in front of the pupil. But you notice that, you know, we have the rotation going on, and then we have this right in front of the pupil after the rotation. So there's a slight problem in here. I mean, like it's very close to what it should supposed to be. But the thing is, like, I'm considering, for all intents and purposes here, that the pupil is exactly in the center of the iris, which is not true. You know, it's like you're gonna notice, for example, in different people, the iris is all over the place as well. The pupil is all over the place. We have the impression that it's in the perfect center, but it's not. It's out of center. And it took me a while to kind of like notice that as well. But a couple of years ago, we were doing something for work, and then we start looking at that, and it's very true. You know, some people have a very, very out of center, actually, pupil, which is very interesting. So let's take a look at this measurement here as well. So we talked about the eyeball size and the iris size, right? But now let's take a look at this one here, which is like you can look at, you can Google it. It's called pupillary distance, so the pupil distance, right? And that's basically what I measure, you know, it's like in medical exams and all that stuff. And then you can see right here straight away, the average adult pupillary distance is between 54 and 74 millimeters. So, you know, it's a big range of variation, right? Some people have large heads, some people have smaller heads. And then kids here, it's you know, the lower end of it, right? So I kind of like tried to find like an average of this. So the average of this would be what, like 64, right? The right in the middle at 50% percentile. So that's basically what I'm considering here. So I'm using a value that's a little bit less than that actually, it's 63. So let's pretend now that the pupil, instead of being right here where this locator is, right there, going against the pupil, if we have to consider, for example, that the pupil is out of center, we can consider, for example, maybe it's going to be slightly towards the center like that, or maybe slightly towards the center right here. And then you get around like 62 instead, but still that ballpark. So as long as you have something that ballpark, you're going to be good. So that's the 3 measurements that we're going to need for now. So we know the size of the eyeball in average, the size of the iris in average, and the distance between the eyes, because now we are tracking the distance between the pupils, so we can actually track the distance between the eyes. Obviously, if I move this following that principle that the pupil is going to be out of place, like off center, I can just, if I bring something like that and like that, right, then the distance here is going to be slightly different, 62, 61. But yeah, but that's kind of like what we need for now. So let's do something here. I'm not going to consider all the other objects part of the eyeball just yet. I'm just going to consider this. I want to bring this to ZBrush and then make sure that this matches the eyes in there, because I want to make sure that my old lady has kind of like an average kind of size. Although I didn't make her head a full size yesterday. Remember, like I made it slightly smaller because I thought she would be like a smaller person. So I might have to adjust just slightly, you know, it's like maybe a tiny little bit smaller than what I have in here, or maybe the distance is going to have to adjust. But overall, that's very similar to what I'm going to need. So I'm just going to get those 2 objects in here. I'm not going to, again, I'm going to ignore all the other objects. And I'm going to just, let's see, if I have my outliner in here, everything is under their groups right there. So just gonna ungroup it. So Shift P to take it out of the groups. So I have my cornea in there, right? And then let's just do, let's make sure that we have a freezing transform here, which we talked about in the shortcuts yesterday. So I'm just gonna freeze transform it. And I'm just gonna make sure that those guys are not flipped. So a way to check if your normals are flipped, right? Now they're out of the group. Now I can definitely see if they're flipped or not. You can go to your display, and then you're gonna have polygons and then face normals, right? So we can tell that they are facing outwards, right? So we can just go back and then polygon and then face normals. So let's just export those guys and bring it straight to ZBrush. And that's gonna be our reference in there. So let's do file export. And then OBJ, I don't need anything else here. So let's do this. Gonna save always inside of my OBJ so it doesn't get confusing. Eyeballs size ref, something like that. And then let's switch to ZBrush. Now my movie's saved. It's done. So let me just let's just save this movie here. Export. I hope it doesn't take too long. Let's see. Actually, I can save the movie itself, right? Let's do that. Let's see if that one works. Let's see. Time lapse. And I'm gonna have to run it again later. I just don't want to torture you guys in there with this. Another thing I can actually do here is to save the scene with the history, just in case. Save with the history. It's gonna take a little bit just because it gets big, right? 3 GB when you have history on. So let's see, 6, and then undo history. So just to make sure we have everything, I don't want to lose that little preview. I want to make sure that I can save that for you guys. And then let's see. What else we have here? Let's open, meanwhile, the other scene that I have, which is the scene from yesterday, the one that we have so far. And we're gonna continue to iterate on that one. So let's get the old lady 2. Saved yesterday at 2:14 a.m. Close to the time I went to bed. This is the one that has the HDRI set in there. You can tell that I like that HDRI map in there. I use it for a lot of stuff. All right, so she's back in there. Oh, this one, yesterday before bed, I switched to this mapping here as well. It's also part of HDRI Haven. And this one is called, just if you want to have the name of it, this one is called, it's one of my favorites too. It gives a nice little, so this one's called, yeah, it's a weird name, huh? TEUF, Teufelsberg, something like that, Teufelsberg. And then inner, and then 4K, I think I named it somewhere, somehow like that. But if you just look for this first name here, you're gonna find they have like 2 or 3 different HDRIs from the same environment, from different angles and stuff. So this is a cool one because of the lighting, you know. You have the graffiti in there. It's almost like I've seen skate parks under bridges look similar to this as well. So yeah, it's kind of a nice, interesting environment in there. Has light, a lighting source coming from there, and then multiple from the back. And you have all this shade on the side, so you can get a nice little shade side of the face. You know, you can choose which one you're gonna get. But it's a cool little environment. So let's go back to here to the model and let's import those eyeballs. So I'm gonna just, let me see which one I have here. So this is basically how we started yesterday, right? So with that little face, with the little neck we just built, and then this is basically the current state. So it's kind of like evolve, you know, it's like the model keeps going, and then it's gonna keep going until we have something that we like at the end. From today to tomorrow is probably gonna be very different from this already again. So let me just delete this one we don't need. Keep this girl here, this young lady, and let's just import the eyeballs. OBJ eye size ref. Let's get that. So they're not flipped. In case you have, like, for example, you're bringing stuff from Maya and one of them is flipped, for example, what you can do, you can actually use like a Control Shift and then press Alt just to hide one. And then let's pretend this one is the one that's flipped. Then all you have to do, go to your, at the very end of the list, display properties, and you just click flip, right? And that's gonna be doing this, right? You're gonna go from this to this, and then you just unflip them here in ZBrush. So not a big deal in there. Then I can subdivide a few times, maybe like 1 or 2 times. Don't worry too much about the little bulge in here. We're going to be talking about that when we talk about the construction. Right now, I just want the scale and the rotation, you know, in place. So let's open my old lady here. And she's already in scale, right? We talked about that yesterday. We set them up. So let's just append. So let's do an append and get the eyeballs in here. So they're probably out of place. Let's turn off the... I'm still working on the profile. The profile is still looking a little funny. Let's go back to the eyeballs here. And if you press Alt, you can actually manipulate this, right? Press Alt, you can move stuff around. And if you keep pressing Alt, you can just click one of those and you can center it, for example. If you click Alt and click that little thing in there. So now it's centered, just gonna move it. Remember yesterday, you can either click move in here or just press W, right? To access this manipulator in there. So let's move around, and I have my perspective off, pressing P. So P is off. So just gonna move it down slightly. She's slightly cross-eyeing here at the moment. It's because yesterday I thought it would be cool to make her eyes a little bit more separated. So I did that, and I think I kind of screwed up a little bit in there, which you might add to the fact that I want to transform her into a little bit of, you know, maybe like a fairy or a little elf, you know. So it might be cool that the eyes are a little bit more separated. So let's see, in terms of the position of the eyeballs, one thing that people do a lot, when they put the iris facing right in the middle, for example, like in the middle of the opening of the eye here, if the iris is located in there, it looks a little funny sometimes, you know. So I tend to normally put them slightly up until you barely have like the lower part of the iris right here, barely touching this edge, and then most of it hidden underneath the top lid. That always adds a little more naturalistic look to it, at least like in my opinion. So now that I have the eyeballs slightly in a correct position, or fairly in a correct position, let me just switch back to this, and let's just mask and bring this stuff inwards. And obviously we're still in a sketch phase, right? So don't worry too much about it. Once you have the topology reprojected tomorrow, then we're gonna really start worrying about you know, cleaning things up and making sure that wraps perfectly around the eyeball and all that stuff. But for now, we don't need to worry too much about it. We just need like an opening in there to have the eyeball so we can work around them. So I'm just gonna use my move brush and just press Alt to move using the normals as a reference, right? I can bring it all the way in like that. And then just maybe like smooth out a little bit. And then that should be enough to just like be able to see the eyeballs in here. And now we're gonna have to work around it. So like I said, like she might be a little bit cross-eyed at the moment. I could compensate and bring the eyes back to the original position. Or I can actually play with this and actually bring the eyeballs slightly outwards again. Because like I said, I stylized for a little bit when I decided to bring the eyes a little bit more outwards, right? So I brought things a little bit more outwards for the whole thing, like the fairy I was thinking about. And that my, you know, I think is screwed up a little bit. Or let's for now, let's just like keep like maybe like in the natural position. So I'm gonna bring this in a little bit again. And then this one as well, I'm gonna bring more inwards and kind of try to keep it natural with that position. So I'm gonna work the eyes around it again. But the important thing is that we have an average head that's matching an average size for the eyeballs without looking too weird, you know, apart from the slightly crossed eye look. It doesn't look too weird. So that's what we need, you know. Like I said, like all the scales are gonna be working from this point on. You're gonna have to respect whatever you're doing here, because all the values, based like in Arnold, they're in millimeters, right? Like, so if you're dealing with the scale of the subsurface scattering, you're gonna have to be referring to that, you know. So at this point here, it's kind of okay. Let's do a little quick render just to see if she looks all right. Yeah, it's not bad, you know. Might have to adjust a little bit, but not too bad. So at this point here, now we can start building around it and maybe doing some refinements in there, but keeping in mind that I can keep it slightly rough and then project everything tomorrow, transfer everything to the actual topology, and then keep working on that and really refining with the topology in mind, you know. But at this point here, I think my plan is to actually keep sculpting and talking about it during the process. So another thing you're gonna notice here, I created this little, you know, I put some of my brushes here, the ones I use the most, because it's being a pain in the butt to just do this, right? Like every time I'm talking about it, and I'm gonna switch a brush, if I click here, ZBrush is not smart enough to reveal all the brushes, right? So it's like there's a bunch of them that are hidden in there at the top I have no access to. So to prevent that, I just put some shortcut in there so I don't need to worry about it. And then if you don't know how to do it, you customize stuff by doing this. You go to Preferences, and then if you go to Interface, oh, not the interface, sorry. Is it Custom UI? No, Config. So under Config, you just click like Enable Customize. And that way now you see like you have access to those spaces in there. So if you want to add brushes to any other place in here in the interface, you can do this. You can just dock this thing, because you cannot add from here other than adding like just a big icon like this one. But if you want to add the little ones, you have to actually dock it. So you go to your brush, and then you just click that little circle in there. And then now you have access to your brushes in there. So basically you press Control Alt, and then you click and drag anywhere you want. It can be here, it can be any place of the interface, right? And then once you're happy with that, you just like, now I can just remove it if I want to. Once you're happy with that, you can customize the whole thing. You can just go to your preferences, and then you turn off the Enable Customize, right? And now you're back here, and then you have access to all the stuff you created in there. Just don't forget to actually store your config, and then even save like your save your UI as well. You can do that just as a reference. And if you notice, I mean, like you have a bunch of presets in here, right? This ZBrush has a bunch of different presets, so you can change like the interface. A lot of them have already some customized stuff for you, but if you're customizing yourself, you know, it's like that's basically the way you do it. So let's focus on the model now. So my old lady, she is huge, and slowly gonna get closer, I hope. Her nose seems like the nose is still longer than I think it is, right? Like it seems like it could be, maybe like the eyes could be slightly higher, or the entire lower part of the face could be lower, you know? But yeah, we can do a few of those adjustments. Let's just bring it down slightly like this. And then another thing I have to refer more is to that 3/4 reference, that at this point I'm still fighting some stuff in the front without paying too much attention to the side. And I think that's a good moment to do that. So I'm just gonna click this and open on the side. Let's see, Asian tribal lady. Another thing I did today was this. I was actually looking just now. For example, like I look at this reference here, which is like a difference between like male and female skulls, right? So you can get like some ideas about it. For example, like the brow ridge, right? Like how strong it is in the man, a woman's, you know, not so much. Obviously, you're gonna see some women with a little bit more of that, and some men with a little bit less of that. So, you know, but in average, that's normally like a stronger profile for a man. And then, you know, it's stronger the zygomatic bone and the angle of the maxilla, and the way that it makes more of a sharp angle. You know, it's like in the man, the general volume of the cranium, right? Like it's different as well, but just averages, obviously. But it's cool to just have that in mind when you're dealing with different genres as well. So let's see. The other thing I was doing here is this. So it's always cool to take a look at the X-rays as well for a reference of skull shapes, right? It's cool to look at the skulls themselves, but it's nice to see in the context of of, you know, it's like with the muscles around it supporting all that stuff. You can see the connections right there. You know, it's like in the base of the cranium, and the process of the sternocleidomastoids in here. That's basically that little, that not little, but that big muscle that's going to go all the way from here, and it's going to connect. Well, one part of it's going to connect to the clavicle, and the other part is going to go all the way to the sternum, right? So we have like two heads in there, and then it goes all the way from here to there, right? So it's a nice little landmark to be able to track the neck and the neck rotation, the head rotation, right? So always good to have some X-rays handy when you need it. And then I was about to do something else. Is the old lady, the other one I found yesterday. Where is she? Oh, right here. Which is really cool that I was able to find that one. And also, Greg sent me a private message today on Facebook, and he had this one as well. So it was very cool. I already had it from yesterday, but you know, it's like, just appreciate the consideration. You know, it's like trying to help me with it. So thank you, Greg. And then let's just bring this one. So we're going to start doing a little bit more work concerning that specific angle, right? So I'm going to try to get a little bit closer to that. Oops. Oh, by the way, this was such a revelation for someone in the last class I did, which was like, oh, how you rotate that way, right? And then because normally you just rotate this way, right? But if you want to rotate just like using that angle, like that, the way you do it is basically like you press shift, then you click outside, and then you release shift, and then you can just like drag. So that's very easy if you want to, for example, like match some angle from a photo, for example. It's always easier to do that way, you know. Otherwise, you're going to be locked to the other. And then obviously, if you want to reset it, just do the same thing. So shift, press out, and then press shift again, and it's going to snap. Every time you press shift, it snaps back, right? Depending on the angle you are. So it's very convenient, you know. So just a little trick in there, because I was surprised like people didn't know it, but at the same time, my students already surprised me with a bunch of stuff I didn't know, and I used ZBrush for such a long time, you know. So that the cool thing about those classes that we all learn with each other. So let's see, just add a little bit more of that brow ridge, but being discreet with it. I'm gonna also go back in resolution so I can actually do this in the model. This area here is always a tricky one for me, because you normally see a character with hair and you don't know exactly what's the actual volume, right? But let's take a peek at let's focus on the cheeks in here. Oops, I was about to do the same thing. So now I have my clay build up right there, so it's easier. And then let's take a look at, see, like this corner of the eye is going down way too much in here. Maybe I can shorten it a little bit. And also, seems like this whole area, there is a form that's missing here. So, for example, if I do very strongly so you can see it, basically what I'm talking about is, you know, it's like if you have this line that goes across, starting from the bagging here, right? There's a line here. In her case, it kind of like ends a little bit higher in there, but I'm definitely missing at least like a little bit more of this breakup. So this form, I need to break up into two, but it has to be discrete. So I'm gonna just like do very carefully here, just like smooth it out, just to create a little bit more of that breakup into two pieces right there. And then from here, obviously, like she's not symmetrical, right? So you're gonna see like very different things in both sides. But I'm working with averages in here. I'm just gonna do a little, correct that a little bit. Trying to remove a lot of the lumps, you know, it's like if your model is too lumpy, sometimes you get too excited with those brushes and you start like doing stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, like the surface doesn't look clean anymore, you know? It's good to actually have a clean surface so you can actually add those things later, you know, it's like to those details and bumps and some secondary stuff. But when you're sculpting, like trying to create like a nice foundation for everything else, you know, it's like you're probably gonna be doing, for example, I can create like planes in here by using a very strong intensity for my smooth, for example. I can crank the smooth all the way to 100. And then if I do this, you know, I can create like a plane right there if I want to, right? So you can do that with the smooth, or you can use like the trim dynamic like I was using yesterday, right? Just like create those planes. But in her case, I already went through that process of defining some of the planes at the top of the of the, you know, the zygomatic bone in here, you know, some of the stuff on the sides of the face. And then at this point, I start rounding up everything again. From time to time, if it's missing that, I can actually re-add them and then start smoothing out again. Some people prefer to leave it very visible all the way, you know, it's like down the line, and then actually make a little softer at the end, the very end. Or sometimes people just keep it stylized and just, you know, remove the entire thing. Actually keep the entire thing like very square. But I think that's kind of like overused, to tell the truth, you know. We've seen that a lot with like Clone Wars, you know, for the TV show that was done back in the day. But then it seems like a lot of people adopted that style, which was not like original, right? But they got a little overused after that. And I see a lot of people like doing, you know, especially when it comes to cartoons, very, very squarish models and stuff. I particularly don't like that much because I think it's a little overused, you know. But yeah, to each their own, I suppose. See, let's bring this one up a little bit in there. Still, I like working with sometimes with the modeling, like in very small sizes like this, because I want to make sure that the model works, you know. A big mistake that we make, we get too excited with the details, right? We start like putting pores and all that stuff, and then we start getting like focusing that tiny little piece, you know, it's like and just like going to town in there, and then changing things, blah blah. And then when you zoom out like that, sometimes the model just falls apart, you know, it's like doesn't work. Or some other thing that I've seen like many people doing, which is basically like if you are using a blueprint to nail like a certain angle, for example, like the front, right? People want to nail like the front normally, most of the time. And most of the pictures going to find of someone's going to be the front like that, or 3/4. So they nail the front like that by just like moving stuff around with interface transparent, like I mentioned, right? You can do that. And then it looks great. You see like some likenesses at Zebra Central for years now. That the likeness looks spot on, man. And then it's time for the making of, right? And then during the making of, they start switching to the 3/4 and then to profile. And all of a sudden, like the model falls apart. There is no structure whatsoever, you know. You can tell that that was basically like not a cheat, right? But it was kind of like a very simplistic way to look at the model, just like looking from one angle instead of like trying to make it anatomically correct, even if using averages and something to make that makes sense, you know, it's like something that you know, would make sense from other angles. At the same time, I understand some people, they don't want to do the work if it's not going to be visible, right? So if the model is meant to be used just in a certain angle, they are not going to be, you know, it's like making sure that everything works from all angles, because they can do more work, get this one done faster, right? We do this professionally as well. I've seen this in studio many times, you know, it's like you see some animation done and you can tell that the rig is absolutely broken from certain angles, but then for the camera, it looks perfect. And then when it's time for you to do like blend shapes to help the scene out, you know, sometimes you get notes like, you know, it's like, oh, just keep the way it is, just model to the camera, right? And then make sure that it works good in the camera, and that's about it. So there's like the two sides of the same coin, right? Now, if your artist trying to understand the form and to, you know, it's like each time we do a model, kind of try to improve our like observation skills and things like that, then I would like really try to model that in a way that actually the model works from all angles. If not all angles, for example, like you're not going to be, you know, doing something from the back, absolutely. But, you know, especially with the hair and everything, it might be a little overkill in there. The skull looks, shape of the skull looks still funny. But I would say like at least like things that you share, for example, in your Instagram, whatever, you know, it's like a profile, a 3/4, a front, you know, it's like maybe like from the top, maybe one of those iconic that, you know, the person's looking towards like the infinity or something, you know. Then I would say like just make sure that those angles work, you know, because otherwise, yeah, I think it's important to actually at least try, you know. It's like if you get like more pieces of the puzzle, like I mentioned, you know, it's like if you have access to a bunch of angles, even better, right? But if you don't, like in the case of the African guy, I mean, I had to actually make up a lot of that stuff without having a straight-on reference from him. When I had like some concerns about the profile, I was actually using some other individuals as a base, but kind of adapting for my personal, for that particular model, right? So everything keeping in the same world right there. So yeah, it's the kind of stuff like it's one more tool, you know. It's like the more you understand, and the easier it is for you to create your own stuff, you know. Especially you're gonna do creature work later on. If you have a good knowledge like of the human anatomy of the face, for example, you can actually adapt that to your creatures, you know. Same for body and anything else. Just gonna detail, add a little bit more of this cut right here. She's so cute. It's it's so funny when I added her. I think I told you guys yesterday. I added her picture in Google and asked Google to search for the origin of the picture. It came like the link said like cute Asian ladies. That was basically like the suggestion to look for that for those terms in order to find her. And then you click on it, and then sure enough, she shows up. You know, cute Asian ladies. Yeah, she's kind of like the main representative of the community of cute Asian ladies out there, if there is one. So let's see. I have another wrinkle in here. I can add that secondary, but again, I cannot go full on detail yet because we're just trying to get that sense of her face, and especially her personality, you know, trying to capture a little bit of that. So we're not going to go too crazy with detail, but we definitely have to block some of the secondary stuff to be able to understand some of the facial expression that's happening. Just with primary, you're not going to recognize that. And that's why I think it's important to sketch primary and secondary at the same time. You know, it's like you're really trying to capture, you know, that little soul and that little intention, right? The intention of this person. I'm going to bring this. Yes.
So I have a question. What if I got like massive scars on portion of my face, and it's going to affect my secondary and my primary shapes?
Yeah.
At this point, should I break the symmetry, or should I still stay symmetrical, but then I cannot add those areas that are scarred?
Yeah, I would say like anything that's for example, scarring, I would wait all the way until you have like the pores in place. You know, I understand that you know, it's hard because sometimes it's such a part of the person, right? Like you really want to add them, but I'm just trying to save you guys from doing a ton of manual work later. Like doing pores is like it's a pain in the butt. It takes forever. I would say like it takes a couple of hours at least. You know, it's like I would say. If you're using like an array of pores, probably like 4 or 5 hours at least you're going to be spending like doing that. And so normally I suggest people like just put your headphones, get some nice music, and then keep going with it. So I really want you guys to spend just that time instead of spending 8 to 10 hours instead, you know. And that's why I suggest, for example, if you have like some scars on one side, try to ignore them for now. And then just work on the opposite side that doesn't have the scars, and vice versa. You know, you always use the side that's clean. And then at the end, you just like, okay, it's time to actually add those things now, you know. And then you can definitely keep working on the secondary and even the primary after you have pores, you know.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, once you have the tertiary forms, like all the pores and wrinkles, as long as you're careful moving stuff around, you still can move, you know, your primary. I do this all the time. So the way I do it, basically, like I go from HD all the way down to like a very low res, like maybe not the lowest, but one more like that. And then I try to use like a bigger brush. Then I can move large masses like that, you know. And then the pores should follow. It's almost like the principle of having like a blend shape, you know, it's like in animation. Basically, like the things are going to stretch a little bit, but as long as you're not stretching like localized, for example, like if I'm not going to move this area like this, right? You're going to get a lot of stretching going on in there. But if you do like a bigger movement, then you can do it. That's why before putting the pores on, I would say like try to get the sketch to look at least decent when it comes to the likeness, you know, unless you're doing something that's more free, you know. It's like I'm actually doing more likeness than I anticipated for this character, because I was thinking about keeping more loose, but I'm just like so enchanted by her face, you know. It's like all the little things in there that I'm actually enjoying sculpting her. Yeah, it's like it's up to you guys if you're gonna go for full on likeness, or you know, something a little bit more loose. I'm good with anything you guys gonna try. Anything goes. Let's just bring this one out a little bit. If I bring this one slightly out, it's almost like I'm adding some intention of a slightly underbite in there. And then when it comes to this area here, what I'm feeling is that it still looks very flat. I'm gonna try to bring this out slightly and see if that helps her little face a little bit. And then keep the nose slightly like I have, like a little bit more like a, I have to try to find a similar kind of nose from the profile and see what happens in there. But this is gonna bring a little bit more round. Then probably around here, looks a little bit monkey in there. I'm gonna just bring it in slightly as well. There's a bunch of very subtle forms around this area. And I can show you guys one here, for example. So let's see, if I go around here, just inflate a little bit more around the sides in here. Let's bring it up. I model a lot of times with this move brush using the Alt button. So I can actually move using the normal, right, like that. So I can actually do like bigger changes like this just by clicking and pulling towards the normal. But what I was about to say is this. So if I move her back in here, and then I go and I zoom in. So if I look at the upper lip in here, for example, stuff like that, you know, it's like, it's true what I mentioned so many times, you know, that in my particular case, I mean, like it takes me like 5% of the time to do 90% of the work, right? And then 90% of the time to basically like 95%, 5% of the time to build 95% of the model, and then the rest of the 5% of the model, it takes me 95% of the time to do it, because everything is about detail from a certain point, you know. So you can get like very happy with the way that things work, kind of like in a basic form. But then when you start really observing things and breaking things out, you know, bringing things up, and then just like looking at things very closely, you're going to start seeing more and more things, you know. It's like, it's almost like the details start unveiling themselves, and you start like paying more attention, you know, it's like what's going on. And then it becomes like a much bigger project. So that's why like it's such a freeing kind of experience to just like do sketches, because you don't need to worry about like the next steps of it, you know. But then you're not gonna get like the bigger prize, which is like having a character fully rendered and all that stuff, you know. It's like getting the soul to show up, and so it's like a price we pay, you know. But I'm gonna tell you, the fun part to me is like the most fun part is this part of exploring the forms, you know. And then everything else obviously is like when you meet the character for the first time, it's interesting. It's like there's a lot of very technical things involved. And then for a long time during this project, you guys are going to feel like you're going to be chasing. And it happens to me every single time as well. Chasing. You're chasing the character, you know, chasing the soul in there. And then all of a sudden, it's during like one of those batches of renders you're doing, testing the shader, adapting the shader for the eyes, tweaking things here and there. All of a sudden it clicks, you know, and then the character all of a sudden has soul. And then from that point on, it's a great phase as well, because you're just like iterating on that and trying to improve. And it's like very small increments, you know. Everything is in very small increments, but it's pretty cool too, you know. So I like this phase now, and the phase when you actually finally meet the character, you know, when the character claims its presence in the world, you know. It's like a virtual world. Basically, like, okay, I was searching for you, and here you are, you know. It's like, it's a very cool feeling, I think. And to me, it's always like a surprise too, because I never plan like that much, right? Like I select a picture and I go for it. And it's always like this very risky thing, because the model has a lot of potential to suck at the end. You know, it's like if you are not doing with paying attention to what you're doing. You know, it's like you can get distracted, and then all of a sudden, a lot of stuff go wrong. So I'm always like taking the risk of creating something that might suck at the end, but try my best not to, because I'm being watched by you guys. So there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of you guys are kick-ass artists, you know. So I have to stay on my toes with you guys. Right, let's get this. So, oh, I was talking about that little form in there. So check this out. Right around here, right? Like, just remember that the lips, once you have those lips very full, right? Like a younger person has full lips and all that stuff. And then there's a lot that happens in here. You know, it's like maybe she lost a bunch of teeth, and which is a very big possibility. Look at her face. So this whole area here, for example, moved backwards a little bit, so it doesn't have the teeth supporting this structure anymore. So it kind of like deflated. Naturally, the skin sagging and the loss of elasticity in the skin, right, also contribute to this, all those cracks and all that stuff. Also, like the repetitive movement of making facial expressions for a lifetime, right? You're gonna end up with all those marks in there. Add that to like a sun and all kinds of different things. You're gonna end up like with a beat up kind of skin. But at some point she had very full lips, and then there's deflation of the loss of fat, but also like all the other stuff I mentioned. So I'm gonna try to look at this, but they still preserve some of the form. So I'm gonna start by digging this little thing here, the philtrum, right? I'm gonna dig that a little bit, and I'm gonna make sure that I have this little form here as a little hook. And then from this point here, I can actually dig this slightly deeper. Let me smooth it out a little bit. And then make a little bit deeper here as well, just slightly. And then make sure that I'm actually describing this form separated from the rest in here. And then I can actually add some more form here, kind of like inflate this area. Then obviously with the wrinkles and all this stuff, I can get even further here. There is the zygomatic muscle underneath in here, which in her case is not visible, but you're gonna see this a lot. For example, like some artists, they like to sculpt this area very well defined. So for example, you're gonna see like things like that, it's like the zygomatic muscle coming from underneath, right? But in her case here, everything is so subtle. I don't like a whole exaggerated kind of thing. I like the subtle kind of stuff, it's like it makes more naturalistic looking. So I normally like, I can describe some of those muscles, but then if it's not present in my reference, I'm probably going to soften them quite a lot, until I get something that looks a little bit more like the reference I'm looking at. I'm just going to soften this. And then this area here, it got a little too deep. So I'm going to bring this whole thing forward slightly. Maybe with a move brush would be better, actually. Sometimes it gets too deep, so this has to come forward. This entire area here looks a little too exaggerated. Bring this with my Alt and up to create that little curvature and hook in there too. And then here, this little form in the corner is split in a bunch of different forms in there. So you're gonna see, for example, there's this line here that looks a little bit more squarish. I can bring it like that. And bear in mind that I'm doing everything like symmetrically here, and at some point I'm gonna have to break the symmetry. But there's a lot of interesting forms. If I start like sketching with a very strong brush so you can see, but there's this little hook right here. Just gonna do it kind of like that. Then there is another one that's kind of goes a little bit squarish, and then it goes up, right? And then you have that little form right there. They're gonna have to do this as well. And then from here, you're gonna see that there's those lines. There's one here, another one there. It's like this. We're gonna have like little cuts like that, part of the wrinkle. This has, if you observe this little area here, you're gonna see like there's a little bit of a zigzag and then some little fatty kind of stuff in there, right? The description of the chin, instead of like a single form, is normally split in three. So you're gonna have like the center right here. And then you have like those two forms on the sides. In her case, this one is going to be kind of like coming towards right here, right? And then this whole area here on the side, you're going to have like all this interesting stuff. So this little hook I mentioned in there is going to come to another form like that. And then this has a cut. And basically like this becomes like a, you know, almost like a, everything has a little rhythm, you know. So from here, for example, from this corner, you're going to see those lines coming like one down, another one a little bit higher, right? All those things are things like you can exercise to start observing, you know. It's like try to see as much stuff as you can and try to describe it in the form, you know. And then over time, you're going to start seeing more and more stuff. Like you try to really like, you don't need to try to see like the super fine detail, but I would say like the mid-res detail. It's very important to just like learn more and more how to observe, you know, what's going on, and try to observe those forms within the context of what's going on with facial expression, you know. If there is a bulge being created, that bulge is being created for a reason, right? There is probably like two different forms colliding with each other, and then they're actually creating that bulge. So if I have like a wrinkle, for example, like this one here, let's try, for example, tiny little forms. Like there's one little bulge here, and then there's this other one bigger that goes like this. So I have to describe that form. And then you're going to see in between them, you're going to have like some other smaller ones. So I can actually carve, for example, like around here. And then there's another one. So basically like I can carve it and there, smooth it out, and then build up in the middle. So in between them. So basically like I can describe that one and the smaller one right there. And then over time, I mean, like obviously you're gonna have to be careful about like the amount of intensity you're gonna put in each one of those elements, right? Otherwise it's gonna get too weird. But over time, you're gonna start like describing as much stuff as you can and as much as you want as well, right? It's your option to go as far as you wanna take your own model. But I like exploring and getting at least like the most important of those lines. Sometimes, for example, you have some with a very strong character, like you have like this line in here, which I could interpret as something simple like this, or I can just go, for example, and see that there is one that's a little bit more straight like that, but then there is one coming from underneath that does a little bit more of a dancing here. The same way that some people have, you know, it's like for the nasolabial, sometimes you're gonna see people with like multiple lines, you know, there's another line that's created on the side. Now looking for this angle here, look at the weird angle I have in there. So, you know, keep spinning your model so you can actually see this kind of stuff as well. So like just correct that little extra bulge in there. In the spirit of keeping things clean, you know, it's like the forms have to be clean. Before you can actually make them dirty on purpose, they have to have a structure at least. So let's move this corner here up as well. Make sure that things look slightly cleaner. More intensity here. You guys have any questions so far? Gonna be fun to just sculpt today. There's another interesting form in here I didn't mention. You're not gonna see a lot right there, but it's very subtle. I swear it's there. So if I'm describing the nasolabial fold, right? And I mentioned yesterday that, for example, it doesn't end right here, right? It keeps going. So some people, you're gonna see a lot of this form going even all the way to the side like that. She has a little bit of that, so I can start adding maybe a little bit more volume right here. And the way I'm doing this, I'm using the clay build-up for everything, right? With the very low intensities, 2 or 3. I was actually at 5, but I normally use the pressure sensitivity of my tablet as well to be able to do this very, very slowly, right? So now that I'm describing this type of little hook right here that goes over the nose, now you're gonna notice that if I do, again, very strongly, if I have this form going this way, now here, between this form and this other form that comes from the top in here, you're gonna have a little bit of indentation right in the middle. So that form shows up a lot in certain people. In her case, you see there's a tiny little depression right there. So if I just like carve low intensity, just a little bit of that, just so kind of like it's almost like a faint echo of this form here that comes from the nasolabial. So you're gonna have a little bit of that indentation right there. And it just adds another extra layer of complexity to the model. You know, it's like all those little subtle details, they just help the model to look more and more natural, you know. As long as you have a strong structure, so the model first has to look okay from all angles, right? Like it has to work. So my profile, I don't like it yet, so I'm gonna keep working on it. 3/4, same thing. The front looks a little bit better, but it's the kind of stuff like I need to work on this structure. So if I go back in resolution, I wanna make sure that it works, you know? I wanna make sure that the model seen from a distance look like, you know, a character that's believable, right? And then that's gonna take some time to get that. But at the same time, after that's set, everything is fun, right? Like just like adding and filling up all those gaps with cool detail and adding more organic stuff to the model. But at this point, in terms of in the spirit of demonstrating for you guys, I'm doing this stuff now. But I probably would spend maybe a little bit more time, like really in the bigger forms, than going on this ones. But again, I'm trying to capture the character at the same time, so it's totally fine. So let's try that. Get a little bit deeper in here as well. And this depth in here, you can actually start wrapping around. So for example, you can actually describe this almost like carving this way. So you have a separation between what's the nose and then the cheeks in here. But everything I do is very subtle. So you're gonna try to actually add a little bit of that depth, that separation, by just carving a tiny little bit. And even around here, just like remove some of this little corner and start wrapping around, and then smooth it, blend it. Just trying to, you know, recognize all those muscle groups and the fat on top of it as separate entities, right? We're gonna be dealing with. For her eye bags in here, I'm gonna try to incorporate a little bit more volume around here. Doesn't seem like, you see, like I have this form here very well pronounced right there. And she doesn't have a lot of that. So I'm gonna try to eliminate some of that and bring more, a little closer to the overall height I see around the bags in here. So I'm gonna just blend things and make sure that I build this here very puffy. People with age, it's funny because I say all the time that we lose like the tension of the skin, and then there's the sagginess, and then there's the elasticity that's lost, and there's the fat volume that's lost. But surprisingly, like this area here in the eye bags, it always gets puffier, you know? Instead of like sculpting with a sharper line for this little area here, right? We normally sculpt a very sharp line and then we smooth it out when it's someone younger. When it's someone older, this becomes a little bit puffier. So it's almost like if you started with someone young and use the inflate brush just slightly in there, and you get those puffy, you know, right against the, you know, the eyeball here gets a little bit puffier. So I'm gonna try to represent that. And I'm gonna incorporate a little bit more volume here as well. A little bit more puffiness overall. Fill up this area here as well a little bit. And again, like I'm now like zooming in and working in this specific area, but from time to time I have to force myself to go back to see the whole, right? I have to see the whole and see if it's working in the context. Otherwise, you know, it makes no sense to just like destroy what I had working before, just to add more detail, right? So more important here is the structure at this point. So the structure and the personality of the character. So I have to make sure that I keep checking against different angles. And so let's see. This was a mistake I had. I said something yesterday. I thought that her eyelid was ending around there, and this whole area here is a little bit flatter because it kind of looks like there's an indication, you know, it's almost like there's a little lid right here, and around here. So it's kind of looks tiny, right? But the funny thing is that when I look at the lady in here, it's actually, look at that. That's actually the first form. It's almost like a little bell, right? There's a little form in here and there, and then it's very round. So there's a trick in here, like the lighting is very deceiving. Now I can see here, that's actually, this is wrapping around her eyeballs pretty good. But here I was reading almost like, okay, this is just like hollow in there. Huh? But yeah, it's tricking, you know? That's why it's important to have like all those references so we can actually, you know, decipher the mystery of the puzzle in here. So if I'm looking at that, at her at this angle, now I'm gonna have to start thinking about breaking up that form. So I can try to describe this lid a little bit sharper. We're gonna do this, let's see. A little bit sharper. I think my geometry is not helping. It's a little wobbly in there. It's because I don't have enough support. So my topology is not helping. But around here, let me just dig this a little deeper. All the way around here. And make it a little flatter too around there. And then now, let's try with this guy here to see if we can see a little bit better. And then we smooth it out. Something like that. And let's smooth it. Have a little bit of that bell shape in there. But then obviously with the better topology, I'm gonna be able to, you know, control that edge better because right now it's very lumpy. Right? But yeah, it's gonna be tricky at this point here with the bad topology I have. And I also try to incorporate that double lid in here. So the eyelid is covered by this fold. And that happens with all races, right? Like we have that. It's just like, in her case, it's almost like it's not very visible, but the lid is definitely underneath. And the fold is bigger, you know, it's like covering more of the other side in here. So now that I have that in place, let's see, in terms of the volume itself, if I look at what I have so far, I have something here and something here. So the shape is definitely not like kind of like conforming to the eyeball itself. So I'm gonna just like try to make it a bit more rounded. So I'm just gonna go and cut it around here. Make sure that it reads almost like an echo of the eyeball itself that's underneath, right? Because that's what's happening. But obviously it's not right against the eyeball because you have like all the fat in there and all that stuff. So it's a layer of thickness, right? So you have like the eyelid itself that's covered. And then on top of the eyelid, you have this fold. And then on top of this, below everything, you have the eyeball itself. So it's kind of like an offset on top of another offset. So it's almost like it's the eyeball plus, you know, a bunch of layers of thicker layers, right? So I can try to describe it just to have that impression that the eyeball is right there. And then around here, then I can start adding some more interesting stuff. She has a little lines going up. When you get like to this area underneath in here, there's a hollow area in here. And then you can tell that there's a little bit of web going towards the eyebrows. So you're just gonna dig a little deeper in there and let's just bring that little web around here. Normal, like with other people, right? Like this whole area here, it's a pull. So it starts right here and connects towards the center, right? Or towards the eyebrow in there. So you get like those strong lines and like sometimes like multiple like this, right? But then in her case, I'm gonna just try to add whatever I'm seeing there, which is very, and in her case, it's more like the web is just being part of the orbital cavity in here, you know? It's not like an actual web, it's mostly like, it's just like showing the hollow part. And then it's kind of like riding on top of it. Just gonna do that. I'm gonna create this little echo. And then from time to time, you can actually exercise like, maybe like describing the skull itself, you know, maybe like exaggerating certain things. Just see like, okay, like is it in the correct spot? You know, it's like, how is this whole thing working for me, you know? This is a tricky part right here. This, at least in my opinion, you know, it's like, the transition between the brow right here and then connecting to the zygomatic itself, right? You have to remember there's a cavity there, and then you have your zygomatic going all the way, the zygomatic bone going all the way to the back, and then creating a little triangle around here, right? Like, but this transition around here, this is a tricky one sometimes, sometimes you get a little bit too shallow. Sometimes like people carve this too deep like that, so it looks a little weird in there. Sometimes it's too fat, then it becomes a ball like that, right? Getting that angle correct, and it's gonna be like different from person to person, obviously, but it's tricky, It's like, for me, this transition here is a tricky one. I mean, like if you start looking at the zygomatic bone, you're probably gonna have to define first, like if you have like I hate when ZBrush does that. If you have the cavity in here, right, that means you're probably gonna have a little bit more of a plane going towards here, and this plane is gonna continue going towards there, right? And you're gonna have this mask coming this way, almost like a diagonal like that. So, but you have to make sure that those things work together, So this part for me is a tricky one. And then obviously like the relationships between like the eyebrow here, this brow ridge, and then the area of the temporalis as well. It can be tricky because sometimes we add too much volume, right? We got like too much stuff going on. Sometimes it's too shallow and then it looks funny too. But the funny thing is, like, you're gonna find people with all those things as well. And then it's gonna end up like being, if you don't have the reference for a certain model, then you're gonna be referring to what I mentioned yesterday about having your own internal library of favorite stuff you like. It's like styles, right? Like that you develop. So you normally have something stored in your hard drive there in your brain that basically like your favorite shapes for eyebrows and temporalis muscle, anything like that. And then that's basically when you have to refer to that little internal library, you have to come up with stuff that's not there, that you don't have reference for. And I guess like Kim Jong Ji, right? He's that amazing artist that does all those amazing drawings, like gigantic drawings, and he does everything from his head. It's like, but the thing is, like, if you watch his interviews, like, it's because he practiced that so much when he was younger. For example, like drawing from observation, right? Like just really drawing a lot of the same subject many times until that's internalized in second nature for him. And then that's basically how he does it, And obviously that guy is in a spectrum of like genius, right? I consider him to be a genius, like a modern genius. So there's no comparison for mortals like us to have a library that big. But we have our own little preferences here and there, It's like, and that's what I'm referring to, like little preferences, things that we like doing in a certain way instead of other way, while other artists going to have a totally different approach.
Chris.
Yes.
Apparently Da Vinci used to do that too, by following random people and just usually deformed people and then sketching them later.
Yes, not only that, but he was a freak. He used to steal like bodies from the cemetery actually to study.
Yeah, he's the first creeper.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's the way, right? Like that's what I do too. No, just kidding. I don't steal bodies from the cemetery.
Don't lie, you do.
We all know we do, Chris. Yeah, man. Like people are dedicated, right? Like I think I'm gonna leave this life without feeling completely accomplishing anything. It's just that I'm so hard on myself and stuff, and I keep learning, I think, but I'm never happy with my models at all, man. It's like every single time I post those models, like I like them when I post them because my brain's fried and I'm proud of it, and then I look in the morning, it's just holy shit. And then and it keeps going, It's like that's why I keep revisiting old models, trying to improve them and trying to incorporate like new tools and things that I learn from working on another model. But never happy, man. I wish I could finish all those portraits, but it's part of the struggle, I guess. There's always like a recurrent theme in my Facebook, like friends list, which is like the imposter syndrome, right? Most artists have that. And I noticed like recently, like some of my favorite artists, man, they came out of the closet, right? Not in that sense, not being gay, but came out of the closet, saying that themselves they are, you know, they have that complete like insecurity, you know, it's like about if their work is good or not. And I think it's a valid feeling, you know, as long as it's not like consuming you. I think it's important to have. Otherwise, there's no incentive to actually become better. You know, doubting your own stuff is very important. But as long as you're not getting suicidal about it, you know, it's like that's bad stuff. Yeah, I don't wish that on anyone. But I always take those things, you know, like as a personal challenge, basically. Like I'm always trying to do that to myself, and then I get very harsh on myself. But people normally like are super nice, you know. It's like it's so encouraging to go to a community like Instagram, which I had no idea it would be that cool. And then all of a sudden, like you're surrounded by the people you admire for years, you know, like Rick Baker, you know, it's like all those traditional artists that you admired, you know. And then all of a sudden you're connected to these people, and then from time to time you get a comment from them, you know. It was like holy shit, that's so cool, man, that you can be in that environment, you know. So I love that. Like it's my favorite, you know, it's like media to post my stuff, and also social media. I think is my favorite is Instagram. Now I know that some people hate it because their feed is full of crap, man. Some people complain like, oh man, I get all this crap. I was like, yeah, because you're making yourself watch that crap. So people add like celebrities, like all kinds of celebrities, like pop artists and all this stuff, and then complain that they're getting like some crappy stuff in their timeline. Meanwhile, I'm adding just like artists, like traditional artists, musicians, you know, that I admired, but not like mainstream. And then especially like sculptors and modelers. And my feed, man, is just like a notion of inspiration every single morning. You know, it's depressing because I see amazing stuff there, and then I was like, oh man, I'm not doing anything at the moment. You know, when I go on vacation, I come back feeling guilty, like man, I didn't produce anything. You know, but then and then back to reality. You know, it's like, and then all of a sudden I have something to show, and then you show something, and then people comment on it. You know, it's pretty cool, man. I really like it. And my Instagram, like I said, is very, very clean. It's just like art, you know, art. So that's you make your own Instagram, you know. It's like you can make it a nightmare or a very cool, inspirational place, depending of what type of content you're following, you know. Starting to get a little bit more personality. But again, like this is like so many little passes we have to keep doing that at the end, you hope that it works, you know. Yeah, today we're gonna be doing basically just sculpting. There's something about her forehead. I just like sketched those wrinkles, and they do not correspond to her actual wrinkles in there, right? Like they're kind of like similar, but not in the same spot or anything. Sometimes it can be a problem because if you want to really nail the likeness and you're just like keeping stuff you're doing as a sketch, you know, it's not going to be helpful. But in this case here, I'm going to keep for a little longer, and then I'm going to start cleaning it up. Like there's some of them are higher in here, some have different shapes, you know. That actually is going to influence the expression as well. So I might have to do a little tweak now just as a placehold, and then keep going with it later. Yeah, there are a bunch of little forms. I mean, every time I look, and especially when I do renders, I start seeing more and more stuff. And then I really get frustrated with my speed. You know, it's like I feel like, man, I could be doing faster. But at the same time, it's not slow. It's just like, it takes time. You know, it's like your brain takes time to recognize new forms. Sometimes if you're really in trouble with stuff, what you can try to do is this, right? Just do like a few flips like that. Right? And then another advantage of doing this is that not only your brain understands that as a brand new model, but actually helps to reveal, since ZBrush by default has the light coming from the top, right? So you can get like access to areas like the nose, for example. I even posted this on Facebook the other day, like a little tip, you know, it's like if you're trying to nail nose, it's a good idea to actually just flip it. Oh, let me see, this one, no, this one. Just flip the model so you can actually see how much flatter things are. You know, it's like how much I have to pull this up. Distance as well, you know, it's like this whole thing here, you see like the volume of the lip in there is not correct. I can bring this down and inflate this a little bit more later, maybe after I have the topology perhaps. Yeah, see like there's a curvature in here, you see like right there that I wasn't seeing very much before. So now we can actually incorporate a little bit of that. So I can bring this a little bit lower and then add that little hook around here and then back to up in here. Maybe a little bit too much. Let's smooth it out a little bit. But yeah, it's like it's always a good way to, you know, to try to resolve some forms if you're really in trouble with the likeness. It normally helps, you know. Obviously, you're gonna keep working on it for a while until you get things into place. But yeah, my likeness, I mean, like you look at all my in progress stuff I posted on Instagram ever, and the likeness is not there at all for a long time. And then even when I finish, I'm not happy with the likeness, but it improves like over the period of a few weeks, you know. Just because you're incorporating very, very subtle stuff. Like I said, you can block the main forms in using only 5% of the total time of your project. And then you spend the rest of the time just like putting tiny little nuances of stuff, you know. It's like really, see like there's a little form I saw in there as well. I'm gonna try to incorporate that slightly right there. Yeah, all kinds of little things here and there, you know. So this area here is going lower, and then perhaps see like it's tricky because I'm trying to match like both sides and she's asymmetrical. So I have to compromise. I have to actually pick and choose whatever works the best in here in that situation. Even the shape of the nose in here, you see like how this line is a much more continuous line than what I have. I have actually a little pudgy right there. So I might have to actually reduce that slightly and then build a little bit more of a straight nose coming from the top. Let's try to reduce a little bit of that and introduce a little bit more of this straight line that I see in there. Everything is going to start getting like more and more subtle. You can block all the forms you want and then have everything like in place and proportion and everything. But then you're going to start discovering more and more stuff as the closer you look, you know. And then that's the process that's, it's pretty cool, you know. It's like, it's part of like discovering the character, like I mentioned. Just like going and introducing like this smaller forms. And all of a sudden you're going to start noticing like more life, you know, in the character. So I'm going to introduce a little bit more depth in here as well. Bring this slightly out as well. Something like that. The general shape of the face in here, it looks longer in there. It is longer, right? But at least like, let's try to mix this a little bit more. And then maybe bring this in a little bit longer and not so much breakup from the side. So it's gonna be more like it's a little bit more of like a triangle in there than what I have. So this angle comes down, this one comes up. Then you have the breakup in there. A little bit more volume. Again, trying to conciliate like both sides, considering they're different, right? It's gonna be impossible. So now I have a problem in there because I'm not gonna match in that side. But yeah, it's all about compromising, I guess. I'm gonna try to do a kind of like both, like by using my alt to move stuff using the normals. So I can actually try to approximate without actually nailing it. Even if you work with blueprints with, let's say, like 9, 10 different angles, it's still not like a, you know, a super easy task because you have to actually make sure you're matching each one of those angles. But then if you are trying to eyeball everything, then it's a much higher mountain to climb. But it's also more rewarding when you get to a point that you like, you know. If not, like, if it doesn't look perfect, it's never going to look perfect when you do eyeballing it. At least you can get like a really cool, you know, a lot of style in the model and a lot of life in the model. So that's, to me, it's more important. Yeah, it starts getting a little bit harder and harder to see. I still see a lot of stuff. It's not what I'm saying right now, but I still see a lot of very different stuff. But yeah, over time, if you keep working on it, then your brain's going to start cooking again and saying that, oh man, that looks great. Yeah, let's post this, you know. And that's the thing, you know. It's like if you work a full-time job, and then you're fried at the end of the night, like I am normal, like teaching those classes. I'm pretty fried after a day of work, but I just push forward, you know, just keep doing it. And but your brain at the end of the night starts really lying to you, you know. It's like, saying like, oh man, this looks so good, man, you cannot get anything better than this, you know. Meanwhile, the model sucks, you just don't know it, because your brain is just like lying to you, because your brain wants to see you going to bed. You know, like, dude, you go to bed, you're tired. Nope, you insisted and you keep sculpting, and then all of a sudden you start lying to yourself. And that's the way the shitty work is posted overnight. The ear, I don't have like the same shape that she has in there. I don't know if I'm gonna go for this super long, but I'm definitely gonna go for a more elf-like shape at the end. Now the chin looks much pointier than I would like to have. If I compare that chin back to this one, right, now it doesn't look like that. It looks like a different person. So it's that constant chase, you know. It's like you're gonna have to find those, you know, for example, I'm gonna pull this using the normals and try to get a little bit of that back. Maybe reduce, instead of like having that point kind of coming forward like that, maybe introduce a little bit more, not maybe, but definitely introduce a little bit more of a 45-degree angle. Going back like that. So it doesn't look too pointy from the front anymore, because of the shadow is going to compensate for it, right? So get a little bit of that point. Another thing you can do here too, let's see if it's set. Under render, if you go to preview shadows, you can actually bring this to 0, right? So you get a little bit more, instead of like having a dark shadow like that, have a little bit more of a light coming underneath. So sometimes it helps, you know, especially like ZBrush is not like the best thing out there for evaluating form, right? So that's why I keep asking you guys to render stuff in Maya straight away. And this line here, I'm gonna bring it more towards the center and keep a little bit more of an arc, like that. It's a bunch of like, these edges are so crusty with the lack of topology. That's all gonna have to be cleaned up. So yeah, I added more of the chin, but then now I added like kind of like a roughly bring it down, right? But now just by bringing it back a little bit, I keep like the same length, but actually breaking up this. I'm gonna introduce a little bit more of that here, and then keep it. It's almost like if I split in here in shapes, like in lines. So this is basically like more square like that. This one's more square like that at this point. But it's just like slightly rounder, right? That's kind of like the intention. I'm actually adding that breakup. Can add a little bit more around here, just a little bit more form. So I recover a little bit of that, but then now, if I look at her right there, there's the chin going all the way further. So this point in here in relation to the mouth, let's see, is not in a bad spot. It's just like the breakup looks a little bit bigger, and it's probably going underneath a little bit more as well. Can introduce more of that, and then remove some of that form. be able to evaluate this whole thing. And then here, the jowls in here, which is that saggy spot right there, I'm gonna have to introduce a little bit more volume overall. And then bring this line down to create the gravity effect in there. And those lines, they can get very sharp as well. So if you're, if you have the jowls in there, probably like this line here, depending on the person, you can get very, very sharp, right? So I'm gonna introduce that for now. I'm gonna keep it as a placeholder, just to have something in there to break up like those two groups. But I might have to reduce. Sometimes you get that, and then you're gonna get a little bit more of like, almost like a dimple, right? So sometimes you get that, and then you get some other extra lines coming from there. You're gonna have like some extra lines for the wrinkles in the ears as well. There is one, I think I was looking here yesterday, which was the, let's see if I can find it. This page that I found on Flickr, that's called Nagaland, right? That's the one I found, like more pictures of people from that same region of tribes. Maybe not the same exact tribes, like the AO Naga, like the lady I'm sculpting, but similar, which there was one here that was a very cool close-up of an ear. I thought it was kind of fascinating. So I might use something like that for her own ear. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, this lady, she took a ton of pictures of this tribes in there. Let's see. Look at those dudes, man. Looks like a pimp. Look at that pimp guy. He's the Naga pimp. All right, so this guy here, it's very interesting. Oh, there you go. It's a very interesting ear right there. Right? There's some interesting shapes. The ear is another fascinating thing we're going to be talking about when we actually detailing it and refining those forms. But yeah, he doesn't have like strong ones coming all the way down here. I can actually make her a little bit stronger, have some longer ones coming down. But it's cool to just collect those things, Let's see if that other, not this lady, but let's see the other one. Where is the, oh, there you go. Let's see, 1, 2. Yeah, I can use her from time to time too, but the thing is like the facial expression is different, and at least like, yeah, for example, for the chin is an interesting one, right? Although she has a more relaxed chin in here, right? And it's very different facial expression, but at least, things like underneath here, the nose, right? You can see the nostrils in there. I can start like describing the nostrils as a little bit better. For example, like you can have this line, right, almost like straight across from this angle. And that's going to create the cavity in here for me. I'm just going to dig it deeper. Kind of like goes all the way across. So, it's like the more angles you find, obviously, you're going to start understanding the character better. But yeah, so that one, but the chin in here, it's almost like when I look at here against the light, if I'm gonna say, for example, one thing I do sometimes using my carve brush, which is basically this. The carve brush I have, I think I showed you guys before, but it's basically the Alpha 39 with the default standard brush. So Alpha 39 standard brush, and then Alpha modify. I have this turn into a point like that. So this basically, this is the point of my tool right there on the top, upside down. And then for the stroke, I have it with lazy mouse at 0.02. So that's basically what I use for it. But the thing that's cool about that, you can reduce the intensity of this brush by a lot, like let's say 4. And you can use like a bigger brush, and then you can create those lines like this, right? So you can create like a fake division between like different planes, right? When I look at her in here, it's almost like I can see kind of like a pseudo line in here. So basically, like I can try to incorporate some of that as a sketch like that. And then I can break up, like later, I can actually smooth out just the top and then the sides, or even use like the trim dynamic to do that. So for example, to separate this line from that line right there and create this planes in here, right? I can do that. And in this case here, I'm going to use to as a measure tool as well. So if I look from kind of like below like that, I can maybe like make the chin a little bit longer. Not longer like from the very corner here, but more from underneath. So you can actually extend by preserving that same angle that I had before in there, right? And then now I can actually just go ahead and, you know, return that to the other state and just like smooth the top and then smooth the front. Keep a little bit of that line as a reference in there for me. But slowly you start adding more structure to everything you do, you know. For example, like this whole area in here, I said before, you have I have a separation between this center form and then the two on the sides. But the two on the sides here, they still have to extend, depending on if the person is going to extend further or not. But this one here, you can tell by looking at there that she has more volume around here. And this form extends a little bit more. So I'm going to fill up this gap and build a little bit more of that form. So now I have a center one right here. And then I have those two little helpers on the sides in there, right? And then obviously she has like some of those lines in there that probably going to be coming towards the center line in here as well. Also very subtle. I'm just going to add very subtle for now, and then later I can just describe the wrinkles themselves. But for now, I'm just going to add some of those forms, and always using like a very, very low intensity. I have 6 in here. Normally I keep it 3. But the thing is, like, I always compensate by using the pressure of the tablet. And then in that case, it can be anywhere between like 2 and 10. I still can control it. So yeah. One thing you're going to be talking about when you're doing more of the detail stuff, and especially like the color stuff, like painting the maps manually in ZBrush, is that one thing that people don't talk too much when we're doing like digital art is the importance of the gesture, you know, because the gesture is part of being a sculptor. Like in traditional clay, you can see, for example, you see someone who is a very dynamic sculptor like Simon Lee, right? Spider Zero. You probably know about the guy. If you don't, just Google him, you know, Spider Zero. I sometimes say Spider Lee, Spider Zero, and then Simon Lee. Simon is his first name. That guy is an extremely dynamic modeler. And what I mean by that, like he describes the movement with gesture, right? Like, so he rubs like 2 thumbs over the surface, and he can describe that as something very dynamic. His poses are very action-oriented, you know, very expressive sculptures, very, very cool stuff. And it's all about the gesture. You can tell, like, he knows, like, he's feeling what he's putting in the sculpture in there, the sculpture. And when you go to CG, I mean, like back in the day when CG, we started doing like those sculptures in CG, we started with very technical techniques, very technical things like sculpting with moving vertices, for example. When I started, I was doing moving vertices around, you know. So you see, like what I'm doing here, I'm just describing this little indentation in here. So I'm going to separate. I'm going to do it again, like very strongly so you can see it. But this, I'm going to introduce a secondary breakup right here. But back in the day, we were just like sculpting stuff with moving vertices, right? It was not very artistical at all. And it was very hard to implement any type of expression in it, you know, it's like in gesture, because it was just a technical job. You would do that using a mouse, not even a tablet. And for the most part, unless you're rich back in the day, then you could afford a tablet. Nowadays it's less expensive, but back in the day was a fortune. But nowadays with ZBrush, you can definitely, and you should use gesture for everything, you know. What I mean by that, for example, like if I'm defining those forms, like as the first sketch, basically what I was doing before, you know, is like you're going to be sketching like the major forms, like really following the major forms. And then, you know, it's like really blocking things, almost like as if you were spreading clay over the whole thing, right? And then on top of that, there is factors, for example, like the speed that you're sculpting. Depending on how you use the brushes in ZBrush, the speed is going to affect the way that the brush behaves, right? So if you're doing something very random, I can show you like when I'm doing the sculpture of the fine detail and also the coloring, that if I use the same tool in different speeds, like a very fast like circular motions with my arm, I can get a very different result from doing like a much smaller and more like a slower, it's like slower movements. So gesture is very important for this kind of stuff, because I mean, it's not like you're waiting for the computer to process it, right? Like anything you do, you see the result in real time. Look at that. So all this stuff is real time. She looks pretty cool, by the way. Look, scars everywhere. Yes.
Do you draw at all?
I used to draw a lot, man. Like, not anymore. It's like you're gonna find like on my Instagram, probably like from 2 years ago, a bunch of like there's 1 or 2 drawings in there. But the thing that I started drawing, it's like when I was 5, and I was doing portraits actually. So what happens? Like I started drawing when I was 5, like passionate about what my father used to like. Like he liked the art, and like had a bunch of books. And then we inherited his bookshelf because my father died before I was born. So we kind of like my grandmother, she sent like a bookshelf full of his stuff. And then we discovered all those art books and everything, me and my brother. And then I fell in love with that stuff. And I started drawing, inspired by the stuff that he liked, And over time, like in school, I was in a private school. We didn't have a ton of money, but the money that my father left, I mean, my mom used to, for the private schools, to try to give her sons a better education. And then I remember like spending like long afternoons at home, like completely alone in the room, listening to the music he used to listen, like a classical music. He used to play a classical guitar that was made for him actually, and then I fell in love with that stuff. It's like, so I was drawing all the time at that time, and then when I was about like 8 or 9, I got kind of like sponsored by my school. So instead of paying like full price, my mom was paying half of the monthly payment, because I was drawing like gigantic drawings for the school. They had like the founder of the school was Champagnat or something like that. It's like a Catholic school, and I was drawing like basically illustrating his life for some games that they had. Like every year they had like those games, kind of like a little Olympics in there, and I would do those drawings. And they start basically like they gave my mom like all this discount and everything. So that's kind of like my first like paid job in a way. But then from that point on, I was going to there's a square in the city, the small city where I lived, and so there's a bunch of like art students that they would gather in there, and they would draw people for money, right, to help to pay the studies, their studies and everything. So people would stop by, they would give them a photo, and come back in about like 2 hours or so, and they would have like something ready to go. So I became kind of like their mascot. It's like it was probably like when I was doing most of the stuff, I was 12 or 13, and I was basically doing portraits with just like pencil in the square, and getting paid for it, like, and following these people everywhere they went. I always had like adult friends, even when I was very little. I always liked hanging out with adults, So I was really passionate, man. I had my little storage that I had for my pencils and everything. I was super into that. And then I kind of like, I think I got a little bit exploited with some people were actually, I was doing a lot of work for free, just because, people were just asking, I would just do it. Got burned out on it. And then all of a sudden I was like probably like 15 or 16, I started working. And then I saw in a trip I went to Paraguay, which is really close to Brazil, I saw the Amiga computer. I saw Amiga 500 in action. And I fell in love with that, man. I saw those graphics back in the day. It was like this checkerboard ground with a chrome sphere on top, it was like bouncing around. I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. So I started saving money to buy an Amiga 500, thinking that I would become like some master of CG, right? Like it's, I don't know, 16, probably it was a little bit later. So probably like when I was 18 or something like that. And thinking I would become like a master. And all of a sudden, man, like the computer was not powerful enough to do all those demos they were talking about. Those are being done like Amiga's more powerful, And then it became my game machine. So I used my Amiga to game a lot. but I was always passionate about the CG, and I was like, so when I was probably like 20 something years old, I finally got a hold of a PC. I bought my first PC, was a DX4 66 megahertz. Nowadays we have like 2.95 gigahertz, right? It was like yeah, it was like 66 megahertz. Nothing. The amount of RAM was like if you're rich, you could afford like eight megabytes, not even 8 gigabytes, right? It's like 8 megabytes. And with 8 megabytes, I remember like I had to save a lot of money from the bank, and then I got it. And then basically the animation you would do, you would be able to run depending on the amount of RAM that you have in your computer. So you can run like a few seconds with 8 megabytes. And then that was basically my life, It's like, and then I never stopped buying more PCs. And, it's like, I mean, in Brazil, you had to use like pirate software to have access to anything, because that was like, the price was so bad. So we had to actually learn everything with 3D Studio for DOS, like a pirate version, before we finally got the money to have a little company and then actually buy 3D Studio for Windows, the first one they had. And yeah, man, long story short. But yeah, I used to draw a lot. That's the long story short. And I still miss it, It's just that I got so used to this media that if I have an idea, I'd rather put it into a CG model that I know I can get the results fast than having to relearn the media and fight with stuff, But from time to time, I come out of, retirement from drawing. I post some stuff, but it's quite rare.
Yeah, I find that it could help, like if you get into like a plateau or something.
Yes.
Especially life drawing, like with like all the gesture you're talking about. Definitely. I find it really translates into sculpture.
Yeah, I agree, man. And vice versa, right? Like I think like all those medias, they complement each other. I got an email today from Gino Azevedo. He's from Weta, and he's such a sweet guy, man. He sent me like a random email asking me if I was doing like traditional sculpting, and I said that I don't do it because of those reasons I tell you guys. Like, it's like I'm faster doing this. So if all the time I have to create art is basically after work, I want to basically like get my demons out of me, so I can produce something with the media I know. Instead of like fighting something I don't have a ton of experience, although I did some sculpting in clay, but I'm much faster doing CG, and then I told him like, I really miss that. I want to experiment more with that, but not at the moment, especially with the classes. I do have to produce stuff to be able to teach you guys, so eventually I'm gonna, take a break from the classes. I think maybe like a few months, not teaching live classes, just have like the online content, offline content in there. And then just dedicate a little bit more to improve, It's important to keep pushing for sure. That's another thing that people don't know, It's like it seems like especially if you're an aspiring artist, you're trying to get into the industry. You have all those dreams, that everything is like, it's going to be great and all. And for the most part, it's great. But the thing is like people don't take into account is that it burns you out, right? Like first couple of years is fine, and then you're young, it's like you can do a lot of stuff without getting tired. But then as you pass like 40 years old, like I did like 8 years ago, I'm 48 now, the energy starts dropping, it's got a natural thing, like it starts to really drop. And then on top of that, like the burnout of like working on stuff, like repetitive stuff, like a lot, all of a sudden, like it's harder, it becomes harder. So that's why I like teaching those classes. And also one thing that happens when you work professionally is that you don't have the time to research that much, unless your production gives you the time to do that. You don't have the time normally. You're just basically like become like a little hamster in the wheel, It's like you're trying to deliver the next project. And unless you spend your own time to learn stuff, you're basically like chasing the wheel, or chasing the cheese. So that's why I think it's important. Like if you're a young artist, take the time now, it's like to experiment the maximum you can, it's like do everything you can to experiment with stuff, develop new techniques, it's like really go to town with stuff, and you have the energy to produce a lot too. So this is the time right now, it's like if you if you're planning to have kids and get married and all this stuff, that's going to put like a big dent on your ability to create stuff on your own. You have to, unless you want to be like a very sucky parent, then you can do it. But if you want to be at least a decent parent, then you're going to have to dedicate. It's like you're going to have to help your wife or husband or whoever you choose to be with, and it's basically teamwork. And then it's not easy, man. I had to stop doing anything related to CG for a couple of years, when my kids were little, because I just didn't have the energy to do better, and I had to support my wife. I mean, like, it's a ton of work for a single person. So yeah. So
but you made a good comeback though.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. I was
talking with my buddy Celso. He's also Brazilian. I think he met you at the Unhide conference.
Yeah.
And he was actually telling you a story about how, like, he was referencing me, how it was either choosing your course or an engagement ring. But yeah, no, I remember talking to him a few years back. He's like, "Oh, do you see Chris's stuff? Like, he's making a comeback." And then that's sort of when you announced that you're, I guess after raising your kids, or like they grew up.
Yes,
with it, right?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, man. It's a crazy thing, right? Because back in the day, I was all over the place. I was always supposed to be on the CG Talk, and it was like CBrush Central. It's like I had my name like kind of known because of the challenge. I did a couple of challenges at CG Talk, and then I completely vanished, and then I kind of I show up like right after, I think it was mostly like after the THU when I went. I got so inspired seeing artists in there doing stuff, and then I was like, man, I missed this stuff, I have to. And then yeah, that was a little bit of a comeback for sure.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hello. I checked that Simon Lee's work. Even did you check that Richard McDonald's work?
Richard McDonald? No, I did not. Yeah. But I've seen he's amazing, man. And the thing is, like, I teach sometimes, like with Andrew Kars from Anatomy Tools, as a guest instructor, right? So I help him with the ZBrush part of things, and he's living now in Las Vegas. And he actually splits his studio with Richard McDonald. So there was one time that Andrew texted me. He said, like, I have one of Richard McDonald's pieces, which is like $150,000 piece, basically like holding holding the garage door. He had one piece holding the garage door because like they are working together. It's like they kind of split the studio in there, and he's learning a lot from Richard as well. So tell me.
Even I really love his work. I actually wanted to meet him also, but I don't know when it will happen. Yeah.
It's very, very dynamic, isn't it? Like he's
yes.
Yeah, he hires people from the Cirque du Soleil. He hires those artists, and then they do those amazing poses and everything. Super expressive. And it's like the best of both worlds, It's like using someone who has that dexterity, right? And then it's amazing, man. Really amazing. So many people are so inspired.
That when I searching all those great artists, then it came to you. Okay. Then I found you. Okay, you are also one of the genius.
No, not a genius, man. Not a genius at all. But I'm dedicated at doing stuff to learn for myself. It's like, and I was actually surprised how much interest I had for this class. It's like when I first announced last year, because like I said, like I kind of vanished from the map for a while, and I was like, but I don't know, man. I don't know what happened. People kind of like, I say the same about movies. When you're working in a movie, you can tell like the movie industry, they believe they have all the tools and all the everything like nailed to the point that it's like if they're gonna release a movie, they know they're gonna make money with it, right? And it's still, you see a lot of movies flopping, right? Like after like $200 million it's still flopping. And then what I say is that either the movie has a soul or it doesn't have a soul. It's like, and what I mean by that's like people either connect with the work or they not connect with the work. And then I believe that people connect to my work somehow, and I don't think it's just the technical aspects of it. I think it's just like I put a little bit of my soul in everything I do, you know. It's like, and I think people connect in that level. And I believe like all the artists I admire the most on Instagram, for example, they have that quality too, you know. It's like that. I'm not connecting just like for the technical aspects. Is the movement, is the way that the gaze, right? Like the way that the character is looking is almost like you communicate. You look at the character looks back at you, you know. So I think that's very important. It's kind of like, as an artist, to be able to put a little bit of yourself at every single piece you create is very important, you know. You're very unique. There's nobody like yourself. So yeah, it's very
true.
Very important.
And the character you're making right now, it's my place only.
It's what?
I'm from, it's in my place only.
Oh,
I'm
really?
from Assam, actually.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
That's awesome, man.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel so great when you say you're Nagaland. Then I find it. We say it's seven sister. So
really?
we have 7 states together. Yeah. So where we find these kind of people in Nagaland, Mizoram, and Manipur. Even a lot of people come to my place because it's a hub place for all 7 sisters.
Oh, that's so cool, man. So Seven Sisters is basically like the 7 states?
Yes.
Would you call like 7 tribes?
Yeah, actually, tribe-wise, actually, we have a lot of tribes. Okay. Even if you go to Nagaland, even they have different tribes. Even the language.
Yeah, they have different dialects. Yeah.
Yes.
Very, very cool.
So, yeah.
That's so cool.
I always thought of doing this kind of work. I don't know why people are not looking at. Suddenly you come and doing it.
Yeah, you see, like the world is an interesting place, right? Like we're all connected somehow, and somehow we managed to connect it at that level right here. So that's good.
yes.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
Then that, and it's for lucky for me, I think. I am in that class from India, and you choose the character from India.
From India, yeah. And my name is Indian too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
So
true.
by the way, my name is Indian. Yeah. It's because of, as I mentioned before, my father, he died before I was born. And the thing about my father is that he had a condition called rheumatic fever, which is basically like when you have like a strong cold or some viruses that basically like it's so strong that it basically affects your heart. So he had this heart condition since he was a teenager. And then he knew he would not live a long life. This was like back in the 60s, you know, actually in 1970. He died in 71 when he died. So not a lot of surgeries or anything like that, you know. So as a consequence, he started kind of looking like, okay, I'm 32 years old. That's the age he passed away, 32. And he was like, what's the meaning of life, you know? So he started looking for all kinds of, you know, different philosophies and everything. And he fell in love with Jiddu Krishnamurti, right?
Yes.
So he fell in love with that philosopher. And he said, he told my mom, I want to name our kid Krishnamurti, right? You guys say Krishnamurti, right? Krishnamurti?
Yes, Krishnamurti.
Oh, Krishnamurti, okay. And then, so he fell in love with the philosophy. So basically, like my name came from that passion that he had for the Indian philosophy, you know. So yeah, so you see.
Yeah, the philosophical wise, I think I'm not very sure you want to read or not, but when you get time, you can read that Bhagavad Gita. It's all about life. Okay, it's all about life, but some people think it's about religious. But it's not. It's actually how we deal with things. So, like how you reacting, how Krishnamurti says all the questions, answers are there, is the main book. It's we say it come out from Sri Krishna. So your name, the Krishna, right? It's the God.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Murti is the Murti is an idol, right?
It's a statue. Yeah. So he wrote that book, it seems.
Yeah.
So,
that's very cool, man. Yeah, I did some Zazen meditation, which is basically like a Buddhist meditation I did for a while in Brazil.
Yes.
And it was very interesting too. You know, it's like because they are very open. And so basically, like the Buddhists, they use examples of different religions as well. And it was so interesting because the center where we used to do the meditation was actually a Catholic center. And I think of like a kind of Jesuit or something. And then the temple was basically like a room we had for the Buddhist meditation in there. And it was cool because they had those conferences and they would normally use examples of each other. So there was a Catholic priest, he would use like examples from the Buddhism and vice versa. And he would say like, most of everything you learn, it's you are able to translate in a way or another from one religion to the other one because the essence is kind of like very similar, you know?
Yes.
It's very, very interesting. I'm not a religious person, you know, I just, I like...
even me.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I try to, you know a little bit more about ourselves as humans, you know, in this world. And
yes.
Yeah, so, yeah. All right, guys, so we are kind of like a little bit over here, but I think we managed to do a little bit of a couple of fixes here in the model today. A couple of things like I share with you guys, like random thoughts and some a little bit more technical stuff. And so tomorrow is going to be the day we're going to be transferring all this stuff to the topology model. And by we, I'm saying like I'm going to do it. And then if you guys are still working on your sketches, feel free to keep working on it. Because since this is going to happen tomorrow, and tomorrow is already Thursday, which is the last day of this week for our class, just remember, like, you know, it's like if you have the time to work on it during the weekend, that's basically what I'm going to be doing. And then if you still catching up, you can just rewatch some of those videos, you know, it's like maybe this one from today to help you out. And then we can all meet at the same spot, you know, like on Monday, and be maybe like at same, you know, at the same rate at that point, if you guys can catch up. And then starting next week, things are going to start getting a little bit more complicated. In terms, not complicated, but I mean, like, there's a lot of information that's going to come your way, and it's going to start getting a little overwhelming, you know. But yeah, I think we're going to manage to do this together. Thanks again, guys. I really enjoy talking to you guys, even if most of the time is a monologue. But it's just cool to be around other artists, you know, it's like in sharing experiences and being able to create stuff together is really cool. So thanks, guys, and I see you tomorrow.
Yep, likewise.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.